thank Mike for putting this wonderful symposium together and inviting me to be a part of this really wonderful panel. Really excited to share with you some of my work, and I have to confess that when I did my abstract, I thought I was going to have an hour, and I realized I had to compress it. But I'm really excited with kind of what's happened and how I'm going to put this together. You're going to get, as Mike has we talked about, a snapshot of my work. I'm going to be showing some of my research artwork, my personal artwork, client work, student work, in a PowerPoint on a loop, and I'm going to talk, kind of as Sean has said, less is more. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to invite several people to engage in experiential, I call visual listening and empathy drawing exercise. And I also have some little packets I made up for all of you in the audience that you can do this exercise as well. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of a format about how I'm gonna, this is gonna flow. So let's see, all I need to do here is push. All right, so my topic today is the state of interconnectivity, empathy, aesthetics, and arts-based research. And some of this comes from ideas that I've written about, most recently in an article that Mike was the special editor of in Music Therapy Perspectives. And in this article, I wrote about my evolving identity as an artist, a researcher, and my path of integrating the artist, art therapist, art educator, and researcher within the creative arts practice of what I call bricolage. So what I mean by interconnectivity, simply stated, this refers to being connected together. It's like connecting all the dots, bringing together what I see as multiple aspects of the self. And it's something that I was just talking about that I stumbled onto when I was doing my dissertation research because I couldn't fit in the rigid paradigms and I couldn't work the way I was being expected to work, so I developed some of my own methods. So it's not only within yourself, all the roles, but it's also, I see this within the creative arts therapies, because I bring in multiple methods. My art, my research, my teaching, my therapy practice are all interrelated. I see no other way to work. I draw from my personal experiences as an artist, as a therapist, as an educator. I pull from these identities to engage in what I call qualitative inquiry. I navigate the research process and teaching in much the same way I approach making art. I move in, with, in between, and through the arts. I begin with my art practice, whether I'm developing a syllabus for a class, whether I'm writing a paper. I've done this most of my life in my own education. I can remember when I was in like 5th or 6th grade and I had to do a science project and I couldn't do it in the conventional way. So I did this 3-dimensional sculpture of an Egyptian sarcophagus and I mummified my Barbie doll with beads and found objects. I just had to process information in a different way. But I always go back to the art process. I feel like that's where it all stems. It's where the discourse opens and continues. It's where I frequently return to seek understanding, to recharge and reflect. I feel like this is a recursive process, much like a refrain or a chorus in a song or a musical performance. And as Sean has written in one of his books, and he reminds us, the arts in the performance of research are fundamental ways to discover innovative and powerful means of understanding both the experiences of those we involve in our research, but also our experiences as researchers. And I think this is so key, it's so important, and this is where I couldn't separate myself from my research. And I've worked for an art therapist in this way, so it seemed natural that I worked as a researcher in this manner. Many art therapists, including Sean, have advocated these ideas in many different ways. Barbara Fish talks about response art. Mildred Lockman Chapin talks about making art side by side with her clients and patients to give aesthetic feedback. Pat Allen talks about art as a way of knowing. Michael Franklin talks about developing a self-referential posture as a clinician and as an arts-based researcher. In a similar way, Ken Bruska, is that right? Bruska speaks of music therapy practice and research as a reflexive practice. Feminist scholars, one that I really, really follow and advocate and resonate with is Patty Lather's work. She advocates a similar process when researchers adopt a self-reflective and adopt a reflexive stance. Patty says that the research process is a powerful place to practice, sorry about this, where we can devise rich research designs that change people by encouraging self-reflection and a deeper understanding of their situations in the world. So taking such a position resonates with the practice of many creative arts therapists who routinely reflect on their experiences with clients, patients, and our students. By writing reflexive analysis of our work, feminist researchers can elucidate challenges, reveal social locations and identities, and allow others to build on their experience. In much the same way, arts-based researchers, or art-based researchers, as Sean mentioned, can use reflexive art making in its many, many aesthetic forms to clarify the research process, synthesize material, reveal their position in multiple identities. And some of these examples from the creative arts, or from the arts in general, might be painting and drawing and sculpting and collage, could be dance improvisation, movement analysis, play building and script writing, songwriting and improv, poetic inquiry, found poetry, and autoethnography. So what is the function of interconnectivity in arts-based research? My title slide, titled Bricolage, illustrates this concept. It's a circular image that represents my differing roles into a unified whole. And these roles are ultimately connected. It's a relational process. So what are the connections between aesthetics and empathy in arts-based research? And an internationally known and respected scholar in musicology, she's a musician and qualitative researcher, Leora Bressler at the University of Illinois, reminds us that qualitative experience in research is at its best when the work is engaged and engaging, much like Sean was talking about, compelling, and when beauty and usefulness expand knowledge and understanding. Leora writes that as teachers, or teaches us about the connections between, and I love this, aesthetic-based research, and there are many, many names that people call art-based research or aesthetically based research. Connections between the aesthetics, the empathetic understandings, and the pedagogical power of the arts. So when we talk about aesthetics, I think it's central to the artistic process, to our art practice, and also to research practice. Because the arts provide rich and powerful modes or models of perception, of conceptualization, and engagement with both the makers and the viewers. The arts offer the makers, and that might be us as the researchers, it might be those we engage in our research, and the viewers or audience, unique opportunities to shed light on the research. And for me, making, aesthetics, and empathy in research are inextricably linked. Art making generates this empathy. Empathy through art is a natural byproduct. as David Swanger in 1990 wrote about aesthetic education, this notion of aesthetics and education can be applied to a broader notion of knowledge creation in arts-based research. He talks about empathy having two spokes, the intellectual and the imaginative, and also the emotional and the affective. So Swanger argued that the epistemology of art is empathy, and that empathy must be a part of education, and I will add, arts-based research, because without it, knowledge is incomplete. And without empathy, this necessary, integral part of research or knowledge creation is missing. I think we know this as therapists, and I believe we also know it as educators, that engagement in the arts and developing empathetic understandings, responsiveness, compassion for self and others are all necessary elements in the development of the researcher, the educator, and or the therapist. The arts are a natural and powerful means for creative arts therapists, for arts educators to generate new knowledge, aesthetic understandings, and in which abstract meanings emerge from the art in a research context. I think we can take this further by adopting a philosophical approach that views artwork as kind of an intermediator between either the student and the teacher, the therapist and the client, the researcher, and those we involve in our research. And this idea of aesthetic empathy was put forth in her article about aesthetic empathy and teaching art to children that Lenny Wicks has published about the work of Friedel Dicker Brandeis, who taught art to children at Terezin. This was one of the ghetto camps in outside Prague during World War II. I think her work exemplifies this idea of art having both a psychological and aesthetic and empathic approach. So aesthetics and empathy inform my thinking as an educator, as a therapist, and my processing strategies during all phases of a research process in collection of data, analysis, and writing and representing my work. I draw from all the arts, the visual, poetic, music, drama, to explain concepts and ideas. So some of these examples you've seen in the slideshow that's been showing while I've been talking, but specifically I create collages, also what I call visual notes or visual field notes to document and reflect and analyze the work that I'm doing. I use active imagination, as Sean mentioned, Jung's technique, to kind of free associate either with words or images and create poetic responses to the research. I write dialogic scripts and build plays from interview transcripts and my field notes. Mike can attest to this because I hear songs and I hear lyrics, and that I bring into my research and my writing. I'm not a musician. I took piano lessons and dance lessons. I never had visual art lessons growing up, but I can appreciate the music. My husband says I shouldn't sing, but I love to sing. But I hear sounds and I hear music, and so I bring that into my research as a way to explain what I'm experiencing. I draw from my own personal experiences, my aesthetic sensibilities, as my colleague Catherine Moon has eloquently stated, and all the expressive arts. So how do we make these connections? This is a question. I know Sean talked about what his students ask, and Beth talked about what her students ask. My students just say, how do you make all these connections? How do you make these decisions? And I guess I feel like one way I can conceptualize this is through Jung's concept of what he describes different ways of feeling and judging. Thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting in the research process. I wanted to share just a little bit about some suggestions I have for researchers, how you could cultivate this interconnectivity in arts-based research. And at the end of the article that I have in Music Therapy Perspectives, I outlined several of these, and I think you're going to hear this echoed today. I think you're going to read it in other presentation or articles. But it's so important to know yourself and to be true to yourself. Know what your purpose is, know what your mission is, understand your practice, your teaching, your therapy, whatever that might be. It's just imperative that you honor that. One of the things that happened to me when I was doing my dissertation research, I was doing conventional interviews, and it was frustrating me, and I just didn't feel like I was doing it right, or it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing, so I developed my own method called bead collage. And it came from my art practice. And once I did that, I felt like lots of things opened up, not only for me, but also for the participants in my research, to be able to communicate better their ideas. And I've got some handouts for you that list some of these articles, because I couldn't talk about all of these. But it's just an example where I went back into my own work and my own practice and brought that into the research. Practice and reflect. Develop a solid foundation for arts-based research and qualitative research, and then branch out from there and read all you can. Attend conferences like this. But it does take practice and reflection on your own work and interrogating your own work. And I feel like it is really important to be self-reflective as a researcher as well as a therapist and an educator. Spend time on your craft, trust the creative process, move back and forth between the making and the writing. Art practice is research. Artists examine, they test out hypotheses, they critically analyze, question, interrogate, improvise, and be tenacious, and trust yourself in this particular process. Tolerate any of the ambiguities in the arts and in the art-based research process. There may not always be an answer. Instead, I think we're going to come up with more questions, but that, again, enriches the process. I guess I want to talk just a little bit about some broader implications, and then invite some folks up here to do this exercise, and you can practice it in the audience. I can't tell you, or I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to stay connected to your core and grounded in your practice as an artist. And being true to ourselves, I feel like we can make an impact through our work. If we truly connect with our research participants and disseminated our work in a meaningful, deep, aesthetic way that is practical and accessible, I think we've done our job and we're doing a service to others. And if we live in this state of connectivity and believe that everything we do is connected, our purpose, our passions, our artistries, we can make a difference in the lives of others. So I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to invite a few volunteers that want to come up and do this exercise. And is Timothy around? Oh, great. I've got some little kits. So those of you, about 6 people, if you want to come up here, I'm going to guide you in this exercise. And then I think I've got enough of these for most people. So, and Mike, I can switch here to document camera. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Do both sides.
Do both sides?
Yeah, you see the blue side and the red side.
Blue side and green. Oh, okay.
Oops. Great. You ready to go?
Oh, it's on?
It's on.
Both of them? Okay. Does it come right here?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I'm just going to put up the instructions, and then Timothy's going to kind of hand out. Everybody see that? Okay. So what I have in these little kits, so those of you that want to, you can have 2 people up here. In your kits are some paper and these instructions, and I'm going to give the partners some paper. And there's some markers right here. You can make markers. And somebody can work over here if you want. kit are just these instructions and some paper. And if you want to get a partner, you can practice this exercise, or if you want to do it another time. Oh, I moved it, sorry. I'm talking with my hand. Okay. So basically, this is a visual listening exercise and empathy drawing. It comes from my art therapy practice. The purpose of this is to hone your observation skills and your reflective listening skills, practice reflexive interviewing, and develop aesthetic empathy. So basically how this is going to go, and I usually do this for an hour, and we spend a lot of time on the drawing process, but we're going to do it in an abbreviated form. So I'm going to ask my participants, one of you to be partner one, one be partner two. Okay? Decide who will be one or two. For 2 or 3 minutes, just draw whatever you wish. Okay? Partner one. Partner two, just observe. Just notice the marks your partner's putting on the paper, body language, any nonverbal. Listen to the verbal communication, and then after that person draws, you give them feedback, visual feedback. I want you to avoid any analysis, any interpretation, or any judgment. We very often want to explain, well, this means this or that. Just give people feedback, what you noticed about their process. And then you'll switch partners. And for 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to do the same thing. Okay? All right, great. And those of you out there, if you want to practice it, I've got the little cards that you can do it as well. And then we'll come back together as a group and talk about this just a little bit. Anybody have any questions? It's a little unusual that we're going to switch gears like this. Thank you. All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to give just another minute for partner one to draw. Stop now. This could go on and you could draw for much longer. But partner two, give a little feedback about what you noticed about their process.
I thought it was still.
It is.
Oh. Wow. Yeah, I could just.